Hey everybody, welcome to In the Red Zone. Michael Johnson here with you. Today we're going to be talking about the Big Ten's matchups or somewhat of a schedule for 2024. Of course, this is when USC, UCLA enter the Big Ten. So we're going to take a look at that. I'm going to give you my reaction to some of these matchups. But before we do that, please subscribe to the channel. If you haven't subscribed, like the video and always leave a comment. I love to hear what you guys have to think about the things I say and some of the stuff we present. Okay. Let's get right to it. No reveal. This has been out a few days. If you follow your teams closely, you already know who they're playing. And I just want to talk a little bit about these matchups and who's playing who and some of the rivalries. So here it is. Here's the list. This is the full list of each team and who they're matching up with. And what we really want to look at right now is take a look at UCLA and USC, because that's been the big question, like who are they going to have to play in the Big Ten? How much travel? Things like that. And if you look at UCLA, most notable for them, the road games at Indiana, at Iowa, at Michigan, at Rutgers. So when you look at that, for USC and UCLA, obviously they were going to have to travel a lot. And that's what's happening here. There's a lot of travel here. You go all the way to the East Coast to Rutgers. You got to go all the way to Indiana. You've got to go to Iowa, which isn't too bad, but then to Michigan. I mean, these are essentially 4 East Coast trips, basically. And that's a lot of travel. It's a lot of jet lag. And we don't have dates yet and times for these kickoffs. And dates are really the most important, because I want to see, do they have any back-to-back trips? And where do they match up against some other big-name opponents? For their home games, UCLA will get Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern, Ohio State, and USC, which of course is the crosstown. Ohio State, they travel so well. One of the things I noticed recently was a thing came out about the most watched college football team in each state. And surprisingly, Arizona, it's Ohio State. And it's because there's so many alumni from Ohio State that retire in Arizona. There's a lot of people who are Buckeye alum who live out in the West Coast. And so you'll often see, if Ohio State plays a West Coast team, the majority of the stadium turns out to be Ohio State fans. Probably will be the same way here. I mean, Ohio State fans are going to travel. They're going to fill the stadium. The UCLA, that's going to be like a home game for Ohio State. A lot of people are going to be taking, it's a vacation for them. It's a home game for UCLA, but, it's going to be tough. That's going to be a tough crowd to play against. Taking a look at USC, they have to travel to Maryland, East Coast, travel to Northwestern, go to Penn State, go to Purdue, and then, of course, UCLA, crosstown, so not really much travel or any travel there. Home games for them, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Obviously, Michigan heading to USC is going to be a big matchup. Wisconsin and Luke Fickell going to USC is going to be a big matchup as well. I think the schedule probably favors UCLA here more than USC for the first year in 2024. Like I said, for the West Coast teams, there's a lot of travel. I think I read somewhere one of the schools, I think it might be USC, 25,000 miles of travel in the 2024 season, the most of any school. And so scheduling is going to matter here, where they play each of these teams. Obviously, Michigan, USC, that's probably going to be a primetime game. And it's really interesting because, I went through this a couple days ago with the SEC, and we really focused on Oklahoma and Texas because they are the new entries to the SEC. We wanted to see who they had to play. I'll put a link in the description, and you can go check out that video if you want. But here, the question was, how will USC and how will UCLA stack up in the Big Ten? And they'll be competitive. But, the Big Ten is now doing away with divisions, same as the SEC. And the Big Ten, for the longest time, the Big Ten was just one conference. There weren't divisions. It wasn't until they expanded and added Nebraska, Maryland, and Rutgers that they went to, at the time it was Leaders and Legends division, which nobody could understand which was which. They eventually switched to East Coast, or East Division, West Division. And now we will go back to just one conference, and the top 2 teams will go to the conference championship game. Look, the reality is in Big Ten, the top 3 teams year in and year out, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, in no particular order. And so more than likely, it's going to be two of those three teams. And every once in a while, you'll get a Wisconsin, you'll get a Iowa. But now that there's not divisions, it's going to be much harder for like Wisconsin to get to the championship game. It's going to be harder for an Iowa to get to the championship game. And so this also brings up the protected rivalries. So obviously, Ohio State, Michigan, protected. They're going to play every year. And they should. It is arguably the biggest rivalry in all of sports. And it's certainly the biggest rivalry in all of college football, and the ratings prove that. Last year, this game got 17 million viewers. The next closest game was Tennessee and Georgia in the SEC at 11 million. That is a 6 million viewer difference between the top SEC game and the Ohio State-Michigan game. I don't care, Alabama, Auburn, all that. It doesn't matter. Ohio State-Michigan, biggest rivalry in college football. It's protected. They're going to play each other. So, that being said, when you have Penn State in there, Penn State does not have any protected rivalries. So, they are going to alternate. They're only going to play a team 2 years and then 2 years off, which means they don't play Ohio State every year. They're not going to play Michigan every year. I think the reason this was done, and I know some fans are going to miss that rivalry, but I think the reason it was done is because if you have Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State playing each other every year, they're knocking each other out. And when you're talking about the top two teams in the entire conference, obviously Ohio State, Michigan playing each other every year, it's a big deal for them. So both teams kind of need a break from having to also play Penn State every year. And it gives Penn State a break from playing those two teams every year. And it just makes it a little bit more competitive overall for the entire conference. And it gives all three teams a better shot at being there at the end. Whereas when they play each other, they're knocking each other out, and you might only get one of the three in the championship game. So Big Ten was kind of smart with this. I understand it 100%. They're your biggest draws. I mean, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, all three are in the top 10 schools that draw the biggest ratings on TV, the biggest crowds. All three of them are in the top 10. So you don't want them killing each other every year. And so this makes a lot of sense to me. Although as an Ohio State fan, you know, the Penn State game has become such a rivalry, and you want to see that game. But, you know, and I don't know, the reaction has been mixed between Penn State fans. I think they're a little bit relieved that they don't have to play both schools every year. And so this leads into the idea of, you know, take USC, for example. Lincoln Riley leaves Oklahoma for USC because Oklahoma was going to the SEC. He didn't want to go to the SEC. I mean, I think it's pretty common knowledge now. Thought it was an easier path to win a national championship by going to USC in the Pac-12. Well, now they're in the Big Ten, and their road to getting there is just as tough as Oklahoma's, and maybe a little bit more. So I just like Oklahoma and Texas, where they're, especially Oklahoma's used to winning the Big 12 every year, being in the conference championship game every year. I think that's over with. And I kind of think it's over with for USC. I just don't see them. You know, the expanded playoffs to 12 teams, I think USC can get in the playoffs. I think Oklahoma and Texas could get in the playoffs. But I think the chances of them ever winning their conference is very slim. It's like once every 15 years they might be in the conference championship game. But to year in, year out, USC is not going to be able to compete week in, week out with all these teams. I mean, it's just tough for them. And so, you know, and in 2024, you know, not only do they have this Big Ten schedule to deal with, but USC has to play LSU. I mean, UCLA does too. One plays in the Swamp, the other one plays in California, but it's daunting. So, you know, I got to be honest with you. I think Lincoln Riley is going to bolt from USC within the next couple of years. I don't think he sticks around. I think he's going to be looking for a place he can go and possibly have a much easier path to a conference championship, much easier path to the college football playoff, because it's not going to be easy in the Big Ten. It's just not. So that's kind of what I was looking at here. A couple of other, you know, matchups we'll just go over real quickly. If you look at Wisconsin, you know, in 2024, you know, they're going to go on the road to Michigan and Nebraska, and then they get Penn State at home. You know, Wisconsin's schedule in 2024 is not that difficult. It's manageable for them. And then, of course, I'm an Ohio State fan, so I want to talk about Ohio State. So let's take a look at Ohio State. They got to go to Michigan State, to Minnesota, to Penn State, and then at UCLA. Obviously, 3 of those 4 are fairly close. I mean, they're not big travel. UCLA is the biggest one, and that's almost like a vacation for them. Home games: Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Northwestern, and Rutgers. So honestly, I think the schedule probably sets up the easiest for Ohio State out of all the Big Ten teams in 2024. And then, they'll also play USC every 2 out of every 4 years, UCLA 2 out of every 4 years, Penn State 2 out of every 4 years. And then, the game I'm interested in seeing, which is not on the 2024 schedule, is Wisconsin and Ohio State, because if Luke Fickell's still at Wisconsin at the time, that's going to be a storyline to see Wisconsin and Ohio State and that storyline, and see where Wisconsin's at that point. So very curious and very interested to see that as well. All this being said with the conference expansion and everything, again, Joel Klatt's the one who brought this up, but I think with the way TV's going, this conference expansion is about to stop. And I think you're going to start seeing conference contraction to the point where I don't even think you'll have a Power 5. I think you're going to have a Power 3 conference, maybe Power 2. And it's going to literally be the top TV ratings draw teams in like 2 conferences and then everybody else. And it's going to be a separate playoff, separate national championship. I think in 10 to 20 years, that's where we're at, because the money from TV, the big deals you're getting right now, aren't going to be there forever. That money is going to dry up because the transition from linear TV to streaming is changing the game for everybody. And so there's these massive TV deals are going to start coming down, and the volume is going to start coming down, which means less money to divvy up. And so to keep a super conference, what's going to happen is, if you want to keep a 14-team conference, it's either going to be 14 of the top teams in the country, the top 14 TV draws, all in one conference, or take the Big Ten currently, and teams like Indiana and Purdue and Maryland, who just don't draw eyeballs, it's not going to be an even cut amongst all schools. You're not going to get a $2 billion deal and we're going to divide that 14 ways. It's going to be the Ohio States, Michigans, and Penn States are going to get a massive percentage, and the Purdues and the Illinois and the Marylands and the Rutgers are going to get a much, much smaller percentage. And the smaller schools that don't want to accept that are going to be gone. They're going to have to leave the conference and go find something else. So I think that's where we're going. I agree with Joel Klatt's assessment on that. It's not immediate, but it is going to happen. So I think conference contraction is going to be a reality here in the near future. But for now, everybody's still talking about expansion. And, the Big 12 is going to have some new members, and that's going to be an interesting ordeal as well. It's not as big as the SEC or the Big 10 expansion, adding those 4 teams, but it's still, it's going to be fun to watch. So we have one more year, somewhat normalcy. The Big 12 have their new members that start this year, and then it's 2024. So, there's a lot of things changing in the offseason. They adjusted the transfer portal. No more just constant waivers and be able to transfer to 4 schools in 4 years. That's done. They're going back to, you get the one transfer, and after that, you have to sit out a year when you transfer. They're not going to allow the skipping around, and I'm glad it needed to come to an end. It really did. NIL still hasn't been reined in. You still have these NIL collectives, which should be illegal. It's becoming NFL free agency in college football, and that is really ruining the game. I'm not against these students making money. I mean, they bring in money for the schools, and they should get paid, but it's out of control. There's not a lot of rules, and I think it needs to get really reined in soon. So I hope to see that happen. That's all that I have for this video. Somewhat short. Again, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Like the video, leave a comment, hit the notification bell. You'll know every single time that we upload a new video. And we're ready to get going with the 2023 college football season. It's here, and we're so ready for spring practice to start. We're ready for, or not spring, summer practice, fall camp, and get to that first week. So we're all ready. I'm ready, and let's go. All right, we'll see you next time. Take care.